Most players in IFR use a keyboard, but the majority of players also thinks that a controller is quicker. So today I will be comparing both of them to see which one is quicker and by how much. But before this video gets started, I just want to say I spent a lot of time and effort in making this video, so I'd really appreciate it if you guys smash that like button and also subscribe to the channel. So for this HOTLAP, I'm using a McLaren Shadow with a 1-1 setup. The car is actually maxed out. As you can see, the controller is on the right, the keyboard is on the left, and I'm about to start a HOTLAP. I'm actually driving in Qatar, and as you can see, once the lap starts, you can see on the controller I'm completely normal, perfect line, but on the keyboard I'm struggling to get that perfect line set up. And just before turn 1 I actually went off the curb because I couldn't set up my car properly and it was going in the wrong direction. But so far so good. You can see I took about the same line through that corner, turn 3 I believe, but the controller was way ahead right now. It was like a corner ahead. I mean, the main difference I was feeling at this moment was the controller was slightly unstable but way more precise, while the keyboard was like more stable. I had more traction, but I was a bit more sluggish. I felt a little bit slower through the corners, which is obviously the main effects, and I'm also not very good at keyboard, so I need a little bit more practice if I want to improve my times. You can see the first sector I was 5/10 slower with the keyboard, and the second sector I was on 4/10 slower on the keyboard. What surprises me the most though is this third sector. I lost the most time in the third sector with keyboard, and this sector only composes of straights and one corner basically, or 3 corners. So I was really surprised when I crossed the line and I saw I lost 9/10 on that final sector, and the total lap time lost was about 2 seconds. Now for the race part. I'm racing on keyboard right now, and you can see I just have an amazing start. Keyboard has traction control of course, so the starts there is no wheel spin like controller or mouse, no nothing, but I do have to keep adjusting my tires just so I can have the perfect line into the corner. This turn 1 pretty straightforward. You just put all the load to the right. Sometimes you have to adjust. But for example, if I was on controller, I would have an easier time because I would be way more precise through there. But there are corners where you don't really need to be precise, like this one for example. You see, I just put all the load to the left because I just need to get the car turning and carry as much speed as possible. Of course, this is horrible for the tires, but it's the best way to try to get through the race, especially on keyboard. And you can see I got a worse exit through there, and the other guy was actually on keyboard as well, but for some reason I had way worse exit speed, and I'm not sure if that was just a mistake or something regarding the tools I'm using. Of course I'm using a max car, so it's nothing to do with the car. But yeah, you can see I was running P2 for this entire race, barely slower than this guy who was also on keyboard like I said, and I was losing like maybe a 2/10 every lap from him until the final lap. I lost a lot of time, and you can see here on the final lap I just touched the curb there. Thankfully I lost like basically no time and I just made it through there. But yeah, this is the final lap of the race. I actually started catching him a little bit, but then he just pulled away. I must say, it's very fun to drive on keyboard. I used to drive on keyboard a while ago, and it's fun to drive on it, but it's not the most optimal way. It's definitely competitive. I finished P2 this race, but I don't think it's the best way, especially if tire wear was a thing. I think I would have done way worse. So now for the controller race, you can see on the start I have way more tire spin. I mean, you might not tell I have wheel spin at the start, but the way to tell you have way more wheel spin is that like the tires stay red in the tire wear thingy way longer, and into turn 1 I was lined up perfectly because I had way more precision, and that's what controller is really all about here. For example, for the hairpins keyboard controller, no difference. But for example, for this corner where I have to aim my car in a very straight position, in a specific position, having the ability to steer gently really helped me. And if I was on keyboard, for example, I'd need to keep going left and right, and also through here I needed the perfect line. And you see how on the steering wheel I'm just slightly steering, and of course if I did that on keyboard I would be going left and right. That would absolutely kill my tires. But for example here, full load to the left, you don't need to really worry about anything. But in this race I was P1 for basically all of it. I was set in purple sectors for every lap because there's no tire wear, and I was just getting used to it more and more. It's also way more reactive, the controller, maybe because I'm used to it more and I'm more comfortable with it, but it's definitely more agile, feels quicker of course, and way easier for me. I mean, keyboard is easy, but controller way easier, especially if you used to play driving games on PS4 or Xbox or whatever. Which is the contrary of a mouse, for example. Mouse is way more complicated, which as you can see, I won this race quite easily. I had like a 10-second gap, I think, compared to losing the other race by 2 seconds or a second and a half, I believe. And now to compare the keyboard race to the controller race, we're gonna look at the lap time of each race to see the differences between them. And for the keyboard race, on the first lap I did a 128.063, but on the controller I did 127.846. So I was 2/10 quicker on controller, but there is a difference in starting position, and I started further ahead on controller, which means I had a slower first lap. On the second lap I did a 126.278 on keyboard, but I did a 125.379 on controller, which is almost 9/10 quicker. On the next lap I did a 126.113 on keyboard, and I did a 125.114 on controller, almost a second quicker as well. And finally on the final lap I did a 126.481 on keyboard, and I did a 125.246 on controller, which is 1.2 seconds quicker on controller. So in total, surprisingly, in a 4-lap race, I only lost about 3 seconds to a controller while I was on keyboard. And I must say, if I spend a little bit more time practicing keyboard, I can maybe make it like a second or a second and a half, which means the game has like buffed the keyboard enough for it to be competitive with a controller player or a mouse player. It doesn't really work as an excuse anymore for being slower. And now to the pros and cons of controller and keyboard. I'm gonna start with the pros of controller. I think they're quite obvious, but of course you have way more precise steering, way smoother steering, which means lower tire wear because you're gonna take it easy on the tires. Also, there's no traction control, which is a pro if you know how to control your throttle on the exit of corners, because traction control slows you down to make sure you don't spin. So if you don't have it, you're gonna be quicker and you're gonna be able to exit corners quicker as long as you can manage your throttle properly. Also, you have quicker reactions with controller. You can like instantly flick to a specific direction you need to go to, so you can save your car if you hit a bump or something. But now moving on to the cons, and this was a pro, but it's also a con. You don't have traction control, and when you don't have traction control, you might have slower starts. And if you hit a bump, for example, you might spin out because traction control is not there to save you when you're not ready. And also, if you're not good with throttle, traction control is quite beneficial. So those are the pros and cons of controller. Now moving on to the pros and cons of keyboard. The only pros I can think of for keyboard is that you have traction control, you're gonna have better starts, and you also have instant steering. What I mean by that is like if you press A, you're instantly gonna be steering in a certain direction, and if you really need that, it's available for you, but I don't see a situation when it's really needed. And the cons, of course, is you have traction control. Traction control is really a pro and a con in both things, because now you have traction control, you're gonna be slower on straights, and also you're gonna be slower on exits. but you're not gonna have any spinning and mistakes after you hit a bump. But also another con is when you have max steering, sometimes you're trying to get off like a certain line quickly and you put in max steering. Sometimes the steering is too much and that's gonna cause way more slippage in the tire, so it's not really gonna be going the direction you want. It's gonna be going in a different direction because the grip level is limited, and that also leads to way higher tire wear. And sometimes I've seen in league racing, sometimes keyboard players have double the tire wear of controller and mouse players, so it's really bad for tire wear, and especially for league racing. But yeah, that's about it for this video. Let me know in the comments below if you use controller or keyboard or maybe mouse or steering wheel, and which one do you think is the quickest. And let me know if you want me to compare mouse to controller in a future video, or maybe do a different game while comparing them. But yeah, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to smash the like button and subscribe to the channel. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.